Serve your recognition. Now, I'm going to try to do this from memory, so somebody will help me if I accidentally leave somebody out. But first I want to, and I'm going to make you stand up. So Hayes, we'll start with you, the Reverend Chaplain Hayes Perdue, and his wife Melody. Please stand. They're kind of like the Clintons, you know, a power couple. Maybe they're not like the Clintons. And then we have the next person I want to single out is the Reverend Mark Windward, who recently got promoted to a full captain in the United States Navy, and his wife, KC, who are friends of this diocese. And then my old friend from Virginia Seminary and many other intersections, Chaplain Captain Cam Fish and Paulette, who are all of this diocese. And since this is too heavily weighted on Navy and Marines, let me throw in Father Ralph Clark. He and I spent a year together in Iraq and got each other through that experience. So, Ralph, it's wonderful to see you again. And then, so that's sort of, that's like something old. Those are the old guys. We have a new guy somewhere in this room who is one of the best Episcopal priests I've ever met in my whole life, and that's Father Daniel Sensi. So I got him. I'm happy. Now, our next, that's task number 1. Oh, first of all, guys, did I leave somebody out? Okay, I think we're good. And then the next thing I want you to do is pay attention to a videotape we have for you. Forgive me, I am not tech savvy in the least, so that's probably not the right word to use, but a thing. You're going to watch a thing. It's something that was created for the search for the 7th Bishop for the Armed Forces, which would be me. And I thought it was so good that I take it with me everywhere I go. So let's roll the tape.
These are the men and women of the Episcopal Church's Armed Forces and Federal Ministries. This program is designed for chaplains to give spiritual and day-to-day support to those in the military, VA hospitals, and federal prisons. It's an important part of pastoral care.
My charge as a chaplain was to walk with the warriors.
We're built into the fabric of the military, so that gives us a chance to be with troops in situations that would most likely never happen in an Episcopal congregation.
The biggest way that I can contribute there is being able to connect with the airmen and be able to be that safe space for them to know that there's always somebody that's there for them and has their back and is a safe place for them to go and be able to get support.
Although they may not be practicing from a church setting, federal chaplains take on the same responsibilities as other ministers. They lead worship services, perform weddings and funerals, and counsel those in need. But instead of a just Sunday focus, these chaplains carry out their ministry 24/7. Because many are deployed with their units, it can be a tough life. Many spend months away from family and home. However, their time spent, they say, is well worth it. They're on the front line, giving spiritual renewal and healing to those who need it the most, so their work never stops. Sounds like a difficult job, but to them it's anything but.
There's hardly anything like it anywhere in the United States where we see such broad perspectives of religious expression.
For Paul Rogers, joining the military chaplaincy was an easy decision. A battalion chaplain with the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune, he says it's a perfect fit for him because it gives him an opportunity to care for all people, not just the devout Episcopalian. That's because military chaplains are available to all people, not just those with a religious base.
There's no faith requirement to them to come into my office. So I'm caring for any and all, regardless of their background. And I see all kinds of folks come through my doors, and it's a gift to me to care for all those Marines in so many different ways.
As a military chaplain, Rogers has been all over the world. Although his job is to provide spiritual healing in time of need, he's also ready to lend an ear to someone who just wants to talk. Living in the military arena can be hard. Rogers feels his mission is to make the lives of those he serves less difficult while being a part of their daily mission, night and day. He says it's really about loving people.
For me, getting out and being with people, having the heightened sense of relational connections with folks around me, gave me a chance to be what we would call in the Navy deck plating, being there with them on the deck plates, or in the Marine Corps, I'm out in the field with them, dirty, grimy, all that they do, I do with them. And that's a tremendous gift to me, and it's an area that I long to do, and it's harder to do in the parish, I think. So this gives me a great opportunity to do that.
There are just over 100 chaplains in the Episcopal Armed Forces and Federal Ministries. They serve at facilities in all 50 states, plus several overseas. Each year, the ministry holds 2 religious training conferences to enhance their skills as priests. One is held on the East Coast, the other on the West Coast. It's a pretty tight-knit group. They find the yearly conferences are a good way for them to build community among the chaplains and help them reconnect with their faith.
Particularly, in the Department of Defense, we've got young people who have no faith, who had no opportunity to have faith. We're working to learn how to build community there amongst these young men and young women to show them that there is something that the church can do for them, to care for them. That's part of the missional ministry that our chaplains do.
Around the world, the sun never sets on an Episcopal chaplain. Not only does it take tenacity, but it requires courage and patience to work in these types of environments.
In all 3 of the entities, the priests are performing sacrificial ministries. They are leaders by their sacrifice. They are people who, as in the Gospel of Luke it said, they have put their hand to the plow, and these are the people who did not look back. They looked ahead, they looked at where they were going, and they ended up doing significant sacrifice. Not easy jobs, any of these, but they've done them.
In the book of Matthew, we are reminded that Jesus viewed the service of others and self-sacrifice as one of the superior virtues. When you ask these men and women why anyone would want to make these types of sacrifices, their answers are pretty much the same.
It's this wonderful, unique population that has needs that we can meet.
It's a form of mission activity of the church, and we have a lot to contribute. So hopefully there are people out there that say, yes, this is what I feel God's calling me to do, and the church will support me and encourage me in that.
I believe my job is the best job in the Navy. I wouldn't trade jobs with another naval officer. And as an Episcopal priest, I have the best job that a priest could have. It allows me to be assured each day that God has me where I'm supposed to be.
Obviously, these are people that I am very, very proud of, But as I was sitting there listening to our active duty folks, I was able to collect my thoughts for a moment, and I thought, this is East Carolina, and I have not, I'm remiss in that I have not recognized all of you who have served. So I'd like to pause for a moment and ask for those who have served our country in the various branches, if you would stand so that we can recognize your sacrifice. God bless you. Now let me say that I'm very grateful to Bishop Rob Skirving. He may be a little further than me in that he's already graduated from the baby bishop school, and I'm only halfway through. But I'm younger than him, and I'm better looking than he is, so some of you may disagree with that, but hey, I need to believe that. No, seriously, thanks to the bishop and to Mrs. Skirving for having me here. I am just delighted to be here. And I can say, I'd love it when I could say this, the Spirit of the Lord is in this place. And I am so, so grateful for that. And good to see, when I come to things like this, it's a counterpoint to the naysayers who try to tell us that our church is dying and we don't have enough people in it. It's not that we don't have enough people in it, it's just that we are bad at math. What we wind up doing is counting the people who, what I call the card-carrying Episcopalians, the die-hard Episcopalians who are confirmed and pledge and tithe and all that sort of stuff. But why don't we count all the people that we minister to every Sunday and every week? We would come up with some very different numbers if we did that. Yeah. So let me move on with my words that I have for you. One is that this is, I love symmetry. I suffer from one of those DSM-4 diseases. I think it's the one where you want everything just so. And, when I was 5 years old and entered kindergarten, my late grandmother loved to tell the story about while the parents were queued up to sign their children into kindergarten, I walked all around the entire classroom and straightened every desk and lined up the papers and the pencils. So, well, don't laugh. That's why I'm a bishop today. Well, in this past year, so what's symmetrical is that, as Bishop Rob said, it's exactly 1 year later. And so here I am again with you. So maybe the Lord is trying to tell us something. I have visited actually all 3 Carolinas in the past year, Western North Carolina and East Carolina. And if you count, I think I'm counting right, the three. And from all that I've seen, that soothing old song keeps coming into my heart. You know, the one that says, nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the morning. Nothing could be sweeter than my sweetie when I meet her in the morning. Where the morning glories twine around my door, whispering pretty stories I long to hear once more. Ho, ho, ho. Nothing could be finer than to be in Caroline in the morning. Nothing could be sweeter than my sweetie when I meet her in the morning. Nothing could be finer than to be in Caroline in the morning. Good. Now, as you have heard, I am the new Episcopal Bishop for the Armed Forces, and you just saw my friend mentor of almost 40 years and predecessor, Bishop J. Magnus. And we liked that tape, so much that we decided to keep it. And what is pressing on me is that I seem to have bitten off more than I could chew. May I be honest with you? I like to say it's very similar to marriage. If I had known before what I was getting myself into, I would have never done it. That's a joke. That's a joke. But God has spared me, and things are going extremely well. And I am grateful for all of our chaplains, our spouses, our families, all of our Episcopalians in uniform. We have a far larger representation of folks, in these federal ministries compared to our relatively small size as a Christian denomination. And that is nothing new. That goes all the way back to the 1770s. Episcopalians just love the military. And sticking with our theme, Matthew 13 and 52, I thought I would share with you some of my old things and new things about this amazing ministry of ours. They're not necessarily treasures, but they're things that I definitely want you to hear. So the old things first. Although our military footprint in Europe has been decreasing ever since the Berlin Wall came down, amazingly, the Episcopal Church soldiers on. I have little Episcopal congregations, at least a dozen of them, or worshiping communities dotted all over the world. Our communities at Ramstein Air Force Base, the gateway to Europe, is still strong. When I was there for Easter 2017, over 100 Episcopalians showed up, most of whom never come to church on Sunday, but they heard the bishop was coming, so all these people just showed up. And of course, I asked them where they were when it wasn't Easter. And they gave me the usual answer, oh, sorry, Bishop, mission calls, I've got to, yeah, right. What they don't realize is I was in the service for 32 years, so I know that drill. Again, our congregation at Fort Leavenworth, which dates back to the 1860s and worships in a chapel built by George Armstrong Custer, that great Episcopalian. Well, he was. The one with the red hair and the huge ego and the mercurial personality. He would have made a great Episcopal bishop, Custer. When I walked into that chapel last spring, I was instantly transported back to 1991. Now, for most people in this room, 1991 seems like it was just yesterday. But trust me, 1991 was actually a long time ago, when at the outbreak of the first Persian Gulf War, the Army, I was an Army Reserve chaplain at the time, assigned me to serve there at Fort Leavenworth, ministering to draft dodgers. You will recall that President George Herbert Walker Bush, that great Episcopalian president, he had all these mostly professional people, doctors and dentists and lawyers and JAGs, who decided that after receiving money to get through medical school and law school and all these benefits from the government, they decided that they didn't like that war, and so they weren't going to go. And so President Bush did the right thing. So my ministry to them was, needless to say, very, very interesting, especially the stories that they gave me. And that the Army assigned me there. Let's see. Then I remember in this ministry with people who refused to deploy, then my eyes turned to the pulpit on this visit where I had preached sermons for that year of 1991, and I saw that they have placed brass plaques that to symbolize every chaplain who has ministered to them since the 1860s, and naming every chaplain, even if they weren't necessarily Episcopal chaplains, but every chaplain who had served there, as well as every armed forces bishop. Not bragging or anything, but I got listed twice, because I was there in 1991 as a young chaplain, and then I come back to them a few years later as the bishop. So no ego problems here. Let's see. That reminds me of something else that's old but important, and that is a testimony that I will probably be giving for the rest of my life. When I was first elected bishop, and for those next 2 or 3 months, all I could think about was the mechanics, and quite frankly, the politics of that election. Here you sit in convention, so you know something about church politics. And those who supported my candidacy, and all the ones who told me how to act, and the search process, and how many people we think voted for me, and thinking about all of those things, I am ashamed to say I became very anxious and fearful. And I am ashamed to say not once in those first 3 months after the election did I bow my head and say, "Thank you, Lord, for what you have done." Because quite frankly, I think at that point, I wasn't so sure that the Lord had anything to do with it. And I'm not proud of this, but I think it's an important thing to share. So God decided to come to me in a dream, and I had this vivid dream. As I lay sleeping, God presented to me scenes of key moments in my life in this dream. And interestingly, it was not all the people that I had helped as a chaplain. Instead, it was all of the people who have helped me, and all the people who have supported my ministry, who have loved me and nurtured me and kept me on the straight and narrow, all of the Christian friends that I've known in my military life. And so the dream was almost like that This Is Your Life program. Not that I'm old enough to remember that program, but then once all the faces disappeared, God spoke to me, and he said, "Now, Carl, you see that you have nothing to fear, for I have prepared you to do this work." Isn't it wonderful? And when God said that to me, it's not often that God actually, speaks to you, but he said that to me, and then I woke up, and then from that time until now, my shoulders have been lighter, and my burden doesn't feel, I just feel so much better because God reassured me that he was going to be with me, and I have been praising God ever since, everywhere I go. So I thank God for the old things that our beloved church has given me, our saints, our mentors, our family, our friends, and our faith. And when we become anxious or fearful, or when we listen too much to the partisans and the naysayers, these old things can come to us to remind us who is really in control. Amen? So, as a career military person, we are taught to have the deepest respect for the President of the United States, who we call our Commander-in-Chief. And I do. But I remind myself every day, no matter what the news says, that President Trump is not in control. God is in control. So now I have a couple of new things, and then I'm gonna shut up. Actually, probably not. I'll keep on going until you tell me to shut up. But the first new thing worth mentioning is that in this new bishop life, everything in my life has changed. And I wanted you to know this as Episcopalians, because you see it from your side. I want you to see it from my side, okay? I want you to have mercy on me, East Carolina. Everything is new. I have been an Episcopal priest for 28 years. For 28 years, I had been Father Carl, and I was proud of it. Or another thing is I become a bishop, and all of a sudden, I get very fancy duds. Now, I mean, you know, I love beautiful things, but this is ridiculous. I've never worn jewelry, rings and crosses and things like that. I have always felt it was unseemly for a member of the clergy to do so. So, you know, God is laughing right now in heaven at me standing up here looking like a gypsy. So, you know, these new things, my new life is just amazing. And I serve at the Washington National Cathedral. You know, that little church in Washington, D.C.? Yeah. Oh, my Lord. That's a totally experience that nothing can prepare you for. I still remember the first time that I stood in the old Canterbury pulpit there, you know, which is made of stone and absolutely beautiful and that sort of thing. I almost fell out of the pulpit because it's so high and I suffer from vertigo. So, you know, I had to give a sermon. They probably thought I'd all had too much single malt because I had to give the sermon like this, you know. Let me tell you, while I'm still on the subject of new things, truth, you know, is stranger than fiction. A few months back, I was in the Minneapolis airport awaiting my next flight, which is what I tend to do all the time. And there I was when up came a very lovely white Minnesota family. I knew I was in Minnesota, so I knew how to behave and everything. And, you know, up comes the Papa Bear and the Mama Bear and two little baby bears. And they were just smiling at me like I was dessert or something. You know, they were just really, you know, they were just so happy. And they came right up to me, and the father, as a good Anglo-Catholic Episcopalian would do, grabbed my hand and kissed the ring. And so, he said to me, you know, we are just thrilled to see you, and we are so happy, you know, that you are our presiding bishop, Bishop Curry. Some things never change. By the way, Bishop Curry loves that story, and he tells the same story very often. You know, yeah. Well, the Episcopal Church, like most Americans these days, is the Episcopal Church is excited and energized about ministry to our veterans. So that's something new, and I say that's something new because I can remember a time. I am just old enough that I remember when veterans were not respected. And many of you can relate to this who are in this room. We can remember a time when we would not have stood up proudly and said, I served my country, for fear that somebody might really insult us. I remember it was a General Convention of 1997. I was a younger chaplain, and that General Convention, and now we're going to repeat it again in Austin, this General Convention, we had several chaplains show up in their various uniforms, and what a sight that was. And all of us served communion at the opening Eucharist of General Convention. How many have been to General Convention in this room? You know, it is quite a spectacle, that opening Eucharist. And it so happened that I was standing near one of our friends who shall remain nameless. I had a chalice, and this other Episcopal chaplain had a chalice. And I could see him, and at that General Convention, and I remember we're giving people the blood of Christ, a cup of salvation. And this one lady walked up to him, and after she had received the host, instead of consuming the wine, she spat in his face because he was an army chaplain. And that was 1997. I think I've often thought about that situation, and in my own mind, I would like to maybe not excuse, but explain that woman's behavior, because I believe she was a mom whose son probably was killed in the Vietnam War. And she probably hasn't forgiven God or this country for for taking her son away. I'm just imagining the pain, the kind of pain that woman must have been under. But we don't live like that now. Now I am deluged with people who say to me, Bishop, our diocese or our parish or our seminary, we want to do more for the military and for the veterans. Let me say to you, East Carolina, on behalf of all the veterans and the military, thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful. And keep it up. Another thing that's new is the face of the chaplaincy. I suppose if you subscribe to the cyclic view of human history, I should have seen this as inevitable, but I must say that our Episcopal chaplain corps of people, the 100 and some people, boy, has it changed dramatically from the time, when I became a chaplain. I never thought I'd live to see the day that I am now saying, well, back when I was a chaplain, and I always said I would never say that, but I say it almost every day. But I retired from active duty 7 years ago, and back when I was a chaplain, most of our Episcopal chaplains were white, male, heterosexual, and married, and all that kind of thing. And now, if you could see our present corps of chaplains, it's like the United Nations. I am so proud of our chaplain corps. Different races, different ethnicities. We've got L, and we got B, and we got G. Don't have any T's yet, but I bet you they're coming before I retire as bishop. And that's the world we live in today. And they represent, of course, a microcosm of America's military, all 1.5 million of the people in uniform nowadays. We have left-wing liberals, I like to call them whacked out liberals, and we also have right-wing conservatives, I like to call them the haters. And we have, PhDs. We have more PhD chaplains on active duty than I have ever seen in over 30 years. Clergy from other denominations are flocking to us. We're really having a job managing and vetting these candidates from other denominations. We are literally a melting pot. We are a patchwork quilt. America in microcosm, and I'm grateful to God for that. So I guess the Lord knew what he was doing for choosing me for such a time as this. Another thing that's new, and I'm coming to the end now, is we experience way too many attacks on the chaplaincy. I don't know if you're aware of this, but our military chaplaincy is being attacked on many fronts, primarily by people who reason thus. They say that if military chaplains can't minister to every single religious faith that's in the military, minister to anybody, there should be no chaplains. Now, this is America, for God's sake. We have more, religions and faith groups than Carter has liver pills, and they expect us to have a chaplain for. So I'm worried about that. But then we contribute to our own problems by imitating the secular culture And we are just as partisan these days as our congressmen and senators in D.C. Nobody in their right mind would want to be favorably compared with our congressmen and senators in D.C. So we have work to do to get our spiritual act together as the military chaplains, because if we don't, we will ensure our extinction. I ask you to pray for our chaplaincy and pray specifically for our chaplains, because Lord knows we are missionaries. You know the psalm that says, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Well, that's what chaplains are doing every day. I guess this is my final what's new. In all of my travels, I've come to believe that chaplaincy just might be the wave of the future for Christianity as Christianity marches into the 21st century. And I hope you heard that, because you heard it here first. I think what we now call chaplaincy in the future, in the near future, might be the norm for most of our parish churches. That is to say, in the 20th century, especially after the Second World War, when we completely professionalized the clergy, and then, you know, our understanding became that rectors must have salary packages, and the family must be taken care of, and all that sort of stuff. Well, we now find ourselves in the new century when most of us cannot afford that. So what's currently called chaplains or bivocational clergy or specialized ministry clergy, I'm suggesting before long that's going to become the norm. Now, brief history lesson, that's not new in the Christian community. If you read church history and you look at what the church was like in the first 3 centuries of our life, or you look at what the church was like after the fall of the Roman Empire, there have been brilliant opportunities, and and the church has flourished when we've all held hands and stuck together, and when we've all worked for the kingdom of God. So don't be surprised. I believe we will return to pastors who are not full-time in the parish, and the parish will no longer be defined as those beautiful, elegant church buildings we have, but parish will be defined as the ministries that we are doing in the communities where God has planted us. That's what's happening. Chaplains are doing that ministry right now. We take the church to the world. We meet people where they are. We minister to people, most of whom are not Episcopalian and many of whom are not Christians. We are missionaries bringing the good news of God in Christ to everybody, everywhere that we meet. And so I suggest that we are the future of the church. So, in conclusion, I want to thank you for giving me a bully pulpit for a few minutes, and I just want you to know I'm grateful to God for you and all that you do with all of these military installations that you have in this diocese, and I'm grateful to your wonderful bishop. I think you should keep him, and I just want to say God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.